Today in the lectionary, we have the sickest burn in the Bible. When Jesus starts preparing his disciples for the day he will be crucified, Peter pulls him aside and rebukes him, telling Jesus that there's no way this is going to happen. And it's kind of understood that Peter is saying, I'm not going to let this happen. So in response to this, Jesus pulls away and says, "Get behind me, Satan." Then he calls Peter a stumbling block and says that he needs to stop thinking in human terms and take in the bigger picture. Now it might seem like Jesus is just saying, "Get out the way, get out the way." But in reality, this connects closely to what happened just a few verses earlier. In last week's passage, Jesus asked his disciples who they thought he was, and Peter answered, "The Son of God, the Messiah." Jesus blessed Peter and said, "This was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." He went on to say that Peter is the rock on which the church would stand, signaling his importance as a leader of the early church. There is also a pun in there because Peter is Greek for rock. It's his nickname, Rocky. His real name is Simon, by the way. But now he's gone from having a revelation from God to being called Satan. And instead of being the rock on which the church is built, Peter, Rocky, becomes a stumbling block, like a loose stone in the pavement that catches your foot. In other words, Jesus is telling Peter that he isn't being the person he's called to be. In fact, he's being the opposite. He's trying to hold Jesus back from the cross, but it was necessary that Jesus be crucified so that he could be resurrected and declare victory over death. Peter was afraid to face the crucifixion because he believed it would be the end of everything. Sure, the gospel says Jesus also showed them about the resurrection, but remember that Jesus was also fond of wrapping his teachings up in parables and sayings and object lessons that were sometimes hard to follow. So we should wonder how much of it the disciples actually caught. And if Peter did hear something about the resurrection, he very well might have thought Jesus was speaking metaphorically. Whatever the case, it seems like in Peter's mind, the only thing on the other end of the cross is the end of the movement. And yet, everything else that happened in the life of the church was only possible because Jesus did die and was resurrected. When I hear this story, the question I find myself asking is, what do I see in the challenges I face? Do I automatically assume it's going to ruin me? Do I stop to consider if, on the other side of that challenge, there might be something worth hoping for? If we're too quick to run away from or shut down our short-term challenges, we may be passing up a lot of opportunities for long-term growth. That's because in hindsight, it's easy to see how some obstacles end up being opportunities. The key to knowing the difference lies in doing the exact thing Peter doesn't do, listening carefully to God and being open to new, if frightening, possibilities.